everyone to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We have a great show for you today. I am your host, Tommy Brzee. It is May 3rd, and let's jump right in. We have a number of things to get to today. We're going to start with talking a little bit about Clemson versus the ACC. There's been a new twist in that among number of twists that have happened around that case over the last little bit, but Clemson seems to be kind of going on the offensive lately. Want to break down what that means and what the effects could be of that. And then we'll get into a little bit of talk around bowl games. There has been a lot of talk about players opting out of bowl games. It sounds like there might be a solution coming down the road in terms of NIL structure. Then we'll get into a little bit of a spring overreactions. We did this yesterday with the SEC, and we're going to continue on with the SEC. I had a couple more that I wanted to get out there, so we're going to do part 2 of that today, and then we'll finish it off with a transfer portal update. Things are starting to wrap up, tons of commitments coming in, a lot of defensive players still on the board, so I want to break down everything that you guys need to know there. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your questions on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use the Tip and Donation link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcpodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all. You get to have a kind of a fun, interactive experience here. We both get to kind of go back and forth, which is always fun for the both of us. Again, that's gsmcpodcast.net. But let's jump right in and let's talk about Clemson and the ACC. There's been so much going on with Clemson, ACC, Florida State. All of this has had a ton of twists and turns, a lot of confusing language, because frankly, I am no law major. I am not someone that is very well versed in that part of the field. So it's been a little bit of a learning experience, I think, for us all as this has kind of gone on. But Clemson has been a little bit quiet as of lately. Their suit was filed against the ACC countersuited, and then we didn't hear a lot for quite some time, and now we've heard something quite big. It sounds like Clemson is kind of going on the offensive here. They are suing the ACC. I believe it is a new lawsuit. I'm not entirely sure about that. It was an amended argument for the past one, but it could be that they added another one into the mix. I'm not exactly sure about that. I know the ACC followed that up with countering again to them, so it'll be really interesting to see all this unfold. But essentially, what the new argument is against the ACC for Clemson is they are seeking damages from the ACC, and they're doing it because they believe that the ACC made misstatements and slander against Clemson's title and its own media rights and other tangible property. So the best way to kind of put this is Clemson is certainly in a position where they know that at some point they are getting out of the ACC. It just matters what the, final payment is going to be, obviously, right? They also know that because of that, they are now pitching themselves to other conferences. That's just kind of the way of things. You're putting yourself out there and you're hoping that someone picks you up. They are saying that the ACC being so hard set on saying that this media rights deal is ironclad and you can't do anything about it, and if they try to get out of it, they have to pay an exorbitant amount of money. All of these things that have kind of been surrounding this Clemson and ACC case in particular, they feel has hurt their chances for future, conference realignment, finding a place to set up shop in hopefully the SEC or the Big Ten, but they feel that that has been hurt by the ACC. So they're saying that the ACC is now essentially liable for that. They should not be able to assert certain things that are not fully true about their media rights deal or about Clemson, because Clemson is certainly in a position where they don't want any bad press going out there about them, especially if it has to do with how they're handling things with a certain conference, because you don't necessarily want to bring in someone that is having this type of issue with their conference and is butting heads so aggressively. So they feel the ACC has kind of made that a bigger deal than it is, I suppose, is kind of the biggest argument that can be made. So this is obviously quite the twist. It felt like the ACC was picking up a lot of confidence in both of these cases. I felt like the Florida State one was trending more and more in the ACC's direction, and this one still very well could go in the ACC's direction. But it does show that Clemson is kind of just fighting back, right? They're showing that they are not going to take this lying down. They're not just going to accept whatever comes over the table. They're going to, take what they want, and they're going to do it in the best way they know how. And I think it's something that we've talked about for quite some time and gotten into a little bit around here, but I think one of the biggest things for these schools that want to get out of the ACC, whether it's Clemson and Florida State who are already on the front lines, or Miami and North Carolina and all the teams that are watching from the sidelines, I think all of this is about just essentially overloading the ACC's plate. There's only so much money to go around. There's only so many resources to go around to all of these different battles that they've currently have to been fighting. So it's been one of those things that I think when you look at the tactics of Florida State and Clemson, I think it was fantastic that both of them went from different directions at the ACC, at least fantastic for them getting out of the ACC, because it gave it two totally different cases that you can't tie together, that you can't make argument for one and then, carry it over to the other argument for that as well. So it's one of those things that'll be really, really interesting to watch, and I think with the ACC, they really have to make sure that this is it. And we keep saying that. I feel like we said it after the Florida State case. We said it after the Clemson filed the first suit against them, and we're saying it again here. So this could possibly be something that we're saying, in a couple of weeks about Miami or UNC or whoever, but it's definitely something that the ACC has to, at the very least, put a stop to, or you have to be really hard-nosed about what that exit fee is going to be and not budge an inch. And now the problem with that is you can be as confident in that as you possibly want. If you're the ACC, you can feel like you have the best leg to stand on in the world and everything is going perfectly there. But one of the other things that was kind of thrown into this case by Clemson was they want sovereign immunity, which essentially means that they cannot be sued in another state other than South Carolina, which is a huge part of this case. It's something that we've talked about a number of times with Florida State and the ACC, where they countersued each other, but they did it in their specific states. And that created some interesting conversations, right? A lot of confusing back and forth kind of talk over the last little bit around that particular case, because you want it to be on your home turf. The ACC wants it to be in North Carolina. The Florida State wants it to be in Tallahassee. Clemson wants it to be in Clemson, South Carolina. That's just kind of the way things work. And if they are able to get sovereign immunity and are able to have this case be tried in South Carolina, that's a huge deal. That puts them firmly in the driver's seat as far as I can tell. And I think as well, the ACC still has, plenty of legs to stand on, plenty of arguments to be made. But at the end of the day, home field advantage doesn't just matter in college football games. It definitely does matter in the behind-the-scenes battles that they fight in the courtroom. So it's one of those things that it'll be really interesting to watch this unfold. I think Florida State kind of set the precedent, opened the door, and Clemson joined them fairly quickly. But it feels like Clemson might be on a little bit better footing right now in their particular case than Florida State is. Now, the big thing about this is these two cases are tied together regardless of what, regardless of if they're attacking from different angles, regardless of if they're totally different teams that want to go to different conferences. None of that really matters, right? They're attacking the same entity. They're attacking under different angles, but still, attacking the same thing, which is the grant of rights and the media deal that they are currently under. And if that falls apart, then it's open season. I think everyone understands that. I think it is so vital for the ACC to not only, you're probably not going to quote-unquote win these cases. I think there's very little reality where Florida State and Clemson are in the ACC even 2 years down the road, to be totally honest with you. I think they have made their decision, they've made their mind up, and they have enough money to fight this battle until it's done, essentially. So I think Clemson and Florida State are out the door. Your job now is to get as much money from those people and in the process, deter other teams from leaving, because some teams just can't pay the money that Clemson and Florida State can, and maybe Miami and North Carolina can, but It'll be really interesting to watch. I think the ACC is kind of in survival mode to a certain extent, but they are picking up a little bit of steam in these arguments. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean a lot when if you do lose these two teams and it comes anywhere in the realm of $500 million and below, which it says it could go up to about $750 million. So if you can get it down to that number or below, UNC and Miami, I have no doubt, would follow you. And that becomes a problem because the ACC just has to stay above 15 teams in their league, or their contract with ESPN is null and void. And I think we all understand that when in college football, in pretty much every sport at this point, the people pulling the strings, the people with the most power, are the TV companies that have these massive deals. If that falls null and void, the ACC is dead in the water. So right now, the ACC is kind of grasping at straws, right? They're getting attacked from a number of different angles by a number of different entities, and they're trying to keep it at just those two schools. But there's a lot of things that could happen over the next little bit that would open some floodgates that the ACC just is not prepared for. So it'll be a really interesting thing to watch. I think it's one of those things that we've talked about, Clemson and Florida State for quite some time. And I think a lot of this is one of the big questions I have around this kind of case, especially the Clemson case, where they say the ACC has, diminished their value, has spoken with misstatements and false information, talking about their media deal and how hard it would be to come out of it and all of that type of stuff. They're saying has hurt their value. But how much of that is really the ACC's fault, I guess, is my big question. And I understand the ACC definitely played a part in that. They've definitely been very steadfast in this is, our media deal and it is ironclad and you can't do much of anything about it. But at the end of the day, when Clemson and Florida State decided to sue the ACC, when Florida State did it, and then when Clemson joined in, they knew there was a spotlight on them. They knew that in some ways it was going to be somewhat of a negative spotlight because when you're leaving one conference, you got to join another, and they don't want this situation in their conference to be happening, 10 years down the road if Clemson and Florida State are unhappy then. So some of this is, just when you put yourself in that kind of spotlight where you are going after your conference, there's going to be some bad blood. There's going to be some negative things that come out of that from other conferences and from other entities. But the ACC definitely does, play a certain part in that. So I think this will be one of the more fascinating things to watch. What are the arguments that are made by Clemson, first of all, but also how does the ACC kind of counter? Are they, very steadfast in their this is our deal and we're not budging at all, or are they a little bit more amenable? Do they try to meet Clemson at least kind of halfway? Now, there's a very, very thin line that they have to walk, but do they try to do away with this problem and then deal with the Florida State problem and then kind of take this bit by bit? Because there's a reality where it all piles up and then you have 20 different problems all at the same time, and if that happens, the ACC is in really bad shape. So this will be really interesting to watch. Clemson just threw another wrench into what has been one of the more confusing storylines of the entire offseason. Now, I've thought about it a little bit. I think sometime next week I'll do a brief breakdown of just where we sit with all of this stuff, because I feel like there's a new story, there's a new angle every single day. So I want to give you guys an idea of just where we sit right this second and kind of where we could be going with these cases. So probably we'll do that early next week, so be on the lookout for that. But we're going to take our first break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about an interesting ruling that could be coming in the next couple of years, hopefully, around a new NIL structure. And it's something that has to do with bowl games, and it would do away with something that I think a lot of college football fans very much hate. So we'll talk about that right when we get back from this break, so stick with us.